Welcome everyone to another video, and in this video we're going to cover my 6 effective spicy pick for the Premier Cup. The Premier Cup is going to be the very first meta, or like refined meta for Go Battle League. Is essentially Master League without any legendaries and mythicals, so that means no Malmetal, no Dialga, no Palkia, no Kyogre, no Groudon, and it really opens up the floor for a lot of really interesting Pokemon. There is a very strong meta, and we'll talk about that as we get closer to the Premier Cup, but the core meta has some vulnerabilities that I think some of these spicy picks are going to be able to take advantage of. So the way I've done this evaluation, well, kind of spoiling the first one, is I have done it based off of this evaluation system of where they can't be a top 10 overall PV poke Pokemon, and they can't be Swampert. I think I expect Swampert to be really popular. I evaluated the matchups based off the one shield matchup, and they also do well against the top meta picks, which are, in my opinion, are Metagross, Togekiss, Dragonite, Swampert, Snorlax, and Garchomp. And then I've rewarded 1.5 points if they do really well. If they do well, or they beat Metagross, Togekiss, and Dragonite, and then 1 point for each of the wins they pick up against the other 3. So you can see the top 10 includes Metagross, Shadow Metagross, Togekiss, Shadow Snorlax, Dragonite, Shadow Magnezone, Shadow Dragonite, Garchomp, and Mamoswine. And I think Swampert's like 11 or 12 or something like that. But Swampert's going to be really common, so I expect it to be used a lot. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first Pokemon I am suggesting. This is probably, I'm doing it from most effective or least effective to most effective. So this one is, I might be butchering the name, Braviary. This is the evolved form of Rufflet. It has access to Air Slash, Rock Slide, and Brave Bird with an attack stat of 195.2, a defense of 131.9, and stamina of 189 at level 40. It has close wins against Garchomp, Togekiss, and Snorlax. As you can see, this is a continuum. To the left, closer to me, are the big losses, and then further to the right, away from me, are the big wins, and then closer to the middle are the ties. And then you can see that it loses to Swampert, makes sense. Swampert just going to be able to outpace it, and then it loses to Dragonite, and as well loses to Metagross. Metagross makes sense. The Dragonite one, we'll dive further into it. I'm going to spend about 10-15 minutes going over in high level the 6 picks, and then the next 20-30 minutes after that I'll be diving into PV Poke and going over each of the individual matchups and how to play them. So depends on how much level detail you want to stick around for, but let's go ahead and go to the next match. The next one, or the next the next Pokemon, which is going to be Alolan Sandslash. So as you can see, you want Powder Snow, Ice Punch, Bulldoze. PV Poke does recommend Blizzard, which is a really good nuke, but I do think that Bulldoze is really nice as coverage. It won't allow you to beat Metagross, but at least you can do some damage to it. And then attack stat of 151.7, defense of 165.9, and then stamina 154. It's definitely not the bulkiest Pokemon, definitely not the hardest hitting, but because of its ice moves and its steel typing, ice typing, it does really well against the 2 dragons and as well against Togekiss, and then loses hard to Snorlax, Metagross, and Swampert. But I think it's a pretty interesting pick. The next one is going to be Charizard with Fire Spin, Dragon Claw, and Blast Burn with an attack stat of 188, defense of 148.5, and stamina of 158. So as you can see, Charizard is a really squishy Pokemon, especially in when it plays up in the biggest CP, like the no limit range. It has a huge win over Metagross and huge win over Togekiss, which I think is really key. That pairing is very deadly, and Charizard is able to handle Metagross and Togekiss quite well. It has a close loss to Snorlax, and then as well loses to the dragons, but there's some play in consideration for that, and then as well loses hard to Swampert, and that's not surprising. The good thing is that Swampert cannot one-shot it with Hydro Cannon, So in the 0 shield matchup, you should be able to get off at least 1 blast burn and do a decent amount of damage to Swampert, even though it does resist it. And my next pick is Gyarados. Gyarados is one of the most flexible picks in Ultra League, and it carries that mantle into the Premier Cup. It picks up big wins over Swampert, has good wins over Garchomp because it does double resist the mud shots, and then as well it's dealing super effective damage with Dragon Breath. And then I guess I should talk about the moves. Dragon Breath, Crunch, and Hydro Pump has a very high attack stat of 199.1, and then defense of 158 and stamina of 182. So it has some like decent bulk to it. It's not the bulkiest Pokemon, but it's also not super glassy like some of the previous picks. Then it is able to pick up wins against Metagross, and the matchup is actually even better if the Metagross is not carrying Psychic and is carrying Earthquake, which I expect a lot of Metagrosses to be carrying. With Psychic, it's able to hit Gyarados at least for neutral damage, but without Psychic, then everything is resisted by Gyarados, and Gyarados does have the Crunch to be able to deal super effective damage to Metagross, and also picks up wins against Snorlax. It is bait dependent that you do have to land the Hydro Pump, and then does lose to Dragonite, but again, we're going to go with some nuances of that matchup, and then loses to Togekiss because Togekiss does double resist the Dragon Breath. So Gyarados is going to be a really flexible and potentially one of the best safe switches in the Premier Cup, at least in the early meta. The next one is Lapras. Lapras only maxes to like 2600, but it has a really nice bulk. As you can see, it has Ice Shard, Surf, Ice Beam. Attack stat of 142 is very low for the Premier Cup, but its defense of 149 is okay, and its stamina of 230 is excellent. It loses hard to Metagross, obviously. It loses hard to Snorlax because it just gets outbulked. Loses slightly to Swampert. Swampert does have to land 2 unshielded Earthquakes, and then as well land the Hydro Cannon bait, and then it's able to beat Dragonite, Garchomp, and Togekiss because of its ice moves. And those are pretty straightforward matchups for Lapras. And the last pick is going to be Glaceon. Glaceon has an amazing moveset of Ice Shard and Icy Wind, and then Avalanche is a Side Strike clone, 45 energy, 90 damage. Going to be able to come in clutch when you need to one-shot or almost one-shot a Garchomp or Dragonite. Its attack stat of 199.9 is significantly higher than Lapras, and then as well its defense of 173 is higher, but as you can see, is much lower stamina, so it's less bulky than Lapras, but it's still decent. It loses hard to Metagross, like in most other ice types. It does lose to Snorlax, it just gets outbulked, and then is able to beat Togekiss, Dragonite, and Garchomp because it's able to deal super effective or double super effective damage. And then Swampert, it does lose because those Icy Wind damage is eventually enough to overcome Swampert's spamminess. So those are my 6 spicy picks. We're going to spend the next 20 minutes or so going over the PvP Poke details. Set up in Matrix mode. The left side contains all the 6 Pokemon that I've talked about, and then the right side contains the 6 meta Pokemon with their moveset. Metagross with Meteor Mash and Psychic, Togekiss with Flamethrower and Ancient Power, Dragonite with Hurricane and Dragon Claw, Swampert with Hydro Cannon and Earthquake, Garchomp with Earthquake and Outrage, and then Snorlax with Body Slam and Earthquake. So let's go ahead and check out the first one. So we know that Braviary is just going to get absolutely mauled by Metagross, and it's actually like a pretty bad matchup. Like essentially you don't need to even throw the Meteor Mash. You can actually just straight farm down after you throw the first Meteor Mash, and then you're left with 100 energy. You are at 18 HP left, but that's enough energy to land 2 Meteor Mashes onto the next Pokemon. And trust me, there's not a lot of Pokemon that want to take 2 Meteor Mash. So if you're in that matchup, it is Farm City for Metagross. The Togekiss matchup, you know, it does lose in the 2 shield and the 1 shield, so just take that consideration, and you basically just land Rock Slides. If they do decide to double shield, which is probably likely, then actually the Rock Slide is just enough to KO. and you do have to shield the charge move from Togekiss. It's not a great matchup, but it is at least a win in the one shield matchup. And if you come out of another matchup with energy, could be really interesting. And then the reason why it's not the same with Dragonite is that Dragonite is able to get to Dragon Claw after 6 seconds, while it takes 7.5 seconds to get to a Rock Slide. Think about the Skarmory, Air Slash, and Sky Attack. It's the same thing. Rock Slide is the same amount of energy as Sky Attack, so it does take 7.5 seconds to get there. And then Dragonite's just able to outpace. But if they try to switch in onto a Braviary with Dragonite, I'm not sure why they would do that. Then the Rock Slide would actually come pretty close to KOing. As you can see, it does 97 damage, and Dragonite has 104 HP left, so it would leave it down in single digits. So the matchup's not absolutely terrible, but it is still a loss. And to be honest, like, well, yeah, you kind of need to... I would probably advise not shielding, because the Dragonite probably wouldn't shield, and then leave it at 17 HP and then farm it down with whatever the next Pokemon is. So the matchup's bad, but it's not as bad. And then the Swampert matchup's obviously just absolutely terrible, right? Like, it resists the Rock Slide, it gets really outpaced, it's very glassy, so not really too much there. The Garchomp matchup is actually kind of interesting. So it's just able to, it can actually go straight Brave Bird in this matchup. There's no need to go with the Rock Slide bait. You can just go straight Brave Bird versus Garchomp. But this is assuming that Garchomp is running Earthquake and Outrage. If it's running Sand Tomb and you get Sand Tomb baited, then it's very bad news for you. Unfortunately, it's not even necessarily that close. So the matchup is like pretty straightforward, but it can also be worse if they have Sand Tomb instead of Earthquake, and then you fall for the bait. And Outrage just does a lot of damage, unfortunately. And then the Snorlax matchup is interesting. It does get to a Body Slam, but you win CMP, and does require you to land the Rock Slide bait. Most of the time, Snorlax don't like to shield first, so I would actually recommend throwing the Brave Bird first, and then start baiting. Is probably the point, or go straight Rock Slide after that. And you should be able to win. But the matchup, as you can see, is extremely close. As a normal type, it does double resist the Licks, so Licks only do 1 damage each, which in Masters is like really nothing. And then the Air Slashes do a decent amount of damage to Snorlax, so they eventually add up for it. So that's not too bad of a matchup. When it comes to Alolan Sandslash, the Metagross matchup is just really bad. There's just no going around it. Like, the Bulldoze does 66 damage, which is only about 40% to Metagross, and this is Metagross with Psychic, but the Meteor Mash still does neutral damage because it's super effective to Ice, and then resisted by Steel, and does a lot of damage, just 2/3 to Alolan Sandslash. So it's not a great situation, but Bulldoze at least allows you to do some damage to Metagross, which is better than nothing. The Togekiss matchup, again, pretty straightforward. Just go straight Ice Punch. You win in all shield scenarios. You also win the 1-2, where you have 1 shield and they have 2. Mostly because it just outpaces, and they don't ever get to the second charge move. So Alolan Sandslash, really spammy, picks up a huge matchup versus Dragonite. As you can see, it just really outpaces. It takes 5 seconds to get to each Ice Punch, and each Ice Punch does about half to Dragonite, or more than half, like 55% to Dragonite, and you just need to land 2 of them, and each Powder Snows does 8 damage, so it's actually quite nice. Slightly more, and it resists the Dragon Breath, so it allows it to be a little bit bulkier. You can see the stat spread difference is humongous, but because of Alolan Sandslash's favorable typing and really spammy moves, it's able to outpace the Dragonite, so that's actually quite nice. The Swampert matchup is just straight up bad, right? Like, Swampert probably doesn't even... Maybe it's a little closer if they go straight Hydro Cannon. Yeah, it's a little bit closer, but doesn't make a huge difference. It's still a really terrible matchup. That's obviously a typing situation. The Garchomp matchup, again, Garchomp is dealing super effective damage with the Mud Shots, but the Powder Snows are dealing double super effective damage, and then it does outpace it. If it's carrying Sand Tomb, maybe it's closer. If it goes straight Sand Tomb, it's still closer, but it wins everything but the Zero Shield matchup. But I don't expect too many. Well, who knows what the moveset's going to be, I should say that. And then against Snorlax, probably bait dependent on Snorlax's side. I doubt it can go straight Body Slam and win the one shield. Maybe it can. Actually, can just go, literally just go straight Body Slam. Snorlax's tremendous bulk just allows it to really put in a lot of work versus Alolan Sandslash. So just the stat difference is just too huge, and the licks are neutral, and they're definitely adding up compared to the Powder Snow. It's just like too much for Alolan Sandslash to overcome, even with resisted Body Slams. Yeah, so I think Alolan Sandslash has some really nice play against like the dragons and flyers, basically dragon and fairy matchups. If we go to Charizard does tremendous against Metagross, and as well, but the thing is, like, if they're carrying Psychic, you have to shield, you have to respect the shield, or the Psychic will do 102 of 158, which is 2/3 of Charizard, and these bullet punches still hurt, so you do have to respect it. If they're carrying Earthquake, it's much better. Charizard actually can win down a shield, right? It can actually just go straight Blast Burn, but you have to bank that they're carrying Earthquake, Meteor Mash and Earthquake, and not carrying Psychic, which I think is a debatable situation. Unfortunately, it's kind of difficult to farm down, even in this scenario, because another Meteor Mash would put you very low. So if you Fire Spin here, and then you throw the Meteor Mash, you'll see that after the Meteor Mash, you're down to 11 HP, and there's no way you can farm down. It just has a little bit too much health. So I would recommend that you just build up a little bit past the Blast Burn, then throw the Blast Burn, come out with some residual energy, or choose to I'm not sure, you can one shield and then farm down. Let's see here. No, you can't even one shield. Oh, actually, maybe you can. Doesn't look like it. Oh, it doesn't. Okay, why isn't it shielding this? Oh, nope. Yeah, you can't even. Yeah. You have to throw to take out the Metagross. It's just way too good stats. Meteor Mash is way too good. Does way too much damage to Charizard, but still favorable matchup. You can come out with at least a little bit of energy and a decent amount of HP. And then against Togekiss, unfortunately, the 2-shield matchup, you do have to double bait in order to survive, because the charms are just doing too much damage. If your Blast Burn gets shielded, then it's basically GG in the 2-shield, and they're just going to be able to charm you down. Yeah, they can basically just charm you down. You do get the energy for it, but you're not able to throw it, because you get the energy during the charge move, then the next charm actually ends up fainting you. So that's not a great situation. So you do have to throw. If it's a 2-shield scenario, you have to land the Blast Burn. You have to double bait, which is going to be really tricky. And then Dragonite, it's not as bad as it seems on paper here. Each Dragon Claw does 59, and it takes exactly 3 Dragon Claws to KO. So if you're able to come out of the Metagross matchup with a little bit of energy, you can perhaps flip the matchup versus Dragonite. Pretty unlikely. Like, let's say you come out with 40 energy, and you have that's HP, 100 HP and 40 energy. You know, it's kind of close. It's kind of close. Like, they're very close to another Dragon Claw, which would do a decent amount of damage to it. So at least you can threaten Dragonite, and very similar with Garchomp, but Garchomp actually has more bulk than Dragonite, so it actually takes slightly more than 3 Dragon Claws to take out Garchomp. And then obviously the Swampert matchup's bad, and then the Snorlax matchup, you just barely lose. You just aren't able to survive long enough. if you're able to get a little bit of energy advantage, then you could throw this Slash Dragon Claw, which you have enough energy for before fainting, which actually would be pretty nice. So it's a pretty close matchup. Snorlax can't necessarily switch in onto Charizard and be safe, despite it being a positive matchup. And then Gyarados versus Metagross. It's a very close matchup, but again, it's close because of the Psychic. If they don't have Psychic, then it's a much cleaner matchup for Gyarados. It does recommend throwing the Hydro Pump here. I actually don't think that's necessary. I think you just need to throw the Crunch and then farm down. It's very close. It might be a little bit different if they have Psychic and they end up landing the Psychic. No, it's very similar. You come out with 35 energy. Not enough to land a charge move, but I think that's the better play than throwing the Hydro Pump. Because if you end up getting your Hydro Pump shielded, then that's really, really bad news for you. So, Gyarados versus Metagross. Gyarados is extremely flexible, does really well against Swampert, does well against Garchomp, and then does well against a Snorlax. But the Snorlax matchup is probably pending that you can land the Hydro Pump. Yeah, it's definitely pending landing the Hydro Pump. Well, the Hydro Pump maybe a slight over feint. Maybe you can land the Crunch. No, if you land another Crunch, it's not going to be enough, and you're going to fall just short of it. So you do have to land the Hydro Pump. So that's a little bit iffier matchup. And then against Dragonite, the way that I expect most of the matchups occur, I actually expect it to be more. You do win the 2-shield matchup, but I expect it to be more like this, where you double shield and then you can farm down afterwards. So you can farm down before they get to another Dragon Claw. You're left at 5 HP, but you're almost at a Hydro Pump, and then you can potentially throw the Crunch, and if the Togekiss comes in, they might shield thinking that it's a Hydro Pump, and you get your shield back plus switch advantage. So I think that's pretty good. That's how I expect most of those matchups to play out. So this is not as bad. The Togekiss matchup, not great, but you can win it if you are up a shield. Yeah, and Togekiss can't straight charm you down because of the additional bulk that you have in Master League, or in Premier Cup in this case. So that's nice. So Gyarados, I expect it to be really good. It's very strong against the core meta, like it is in Ultra League. It obviously has its weaknesses, but in a meta where I don't expect I do expect one electric type, which is going to be Magnezone. Magnezone wasn't included on this list because it's obviously top 10, but I think Magnezone is the core breaker. It does really well against Dragonite, Togekiss, and Metagross. So then Lapras does struggle against Metagross. That's absolutely no surprise. The Togekiss matchup, Lapras loses in the 2-shield just because it just gets outbulked at that point in time. Togekiss has like really great defensive stats as well, and it just gets out stat product, but it's able to clean up the 1 shield and 0 shield matchups pretty well. And that's going to be Dragonite matchup. I believe it wins in all shields, just straight surf. It doesn't even need to land. Oh, that's Glaceon. Sorry, it's Glaceon. Dragonite, it just wins straight surf. Doesn't even need to throw the Ice Beam in any of these shield scenarios except for the 0 shield, obviously. But in the 2 shield, it can just throw straight surf, and it can even be down 1 to 2 shields and still win straight surf. So that's quite nice. And then it beats Garchomp. It loses to Swampert, but Swampert has to land the double earthquake, and then land the Hydro Cannon bait. If it goes straight earthquake, then Lapras can get to another charge move, and then as well additional ice shards that would KO Swampert. So it's not a guaranteed win for Swampert. Like if you end up shielding earthquake, then you're in a very good position. And then Snorlax, it just loses because it gets outbulked. And then Glaceon, very similar to Lapras, except for that wins the Swampert matchup because of Icy Wind, and then it has a much closer matchup with Garchomp because I guess because it's not doing as much damage when it just landing straight Icy Winds. And I think in Swampert matchup. Do you land just straight Icy Wind or straight? I think you just go straight Avalanche. Yeah, you just go straight Avalanche. Obviously, if you land the Icy Wind, then this Hydro Cannon will do 25% less, but it doesn't make a big difference. You do need to go straight Icy Wind if you want to win the 2 shield. So really depends on how you want to play it out. You can go straight Icy Wind, win the 2 shield matchup, or straight Avalanche and win the 1 shield matchup. So that's going to be a little bit of a read in that situation. Togekiss, it should be able to straight Icy Wind and win in all shields. But let's check the 2 shield matchup. Oh, it still loses the 2 shield matchup. That kind of sucks, actually. Even despite debuffing these charms from initially 14 damage to 10, it's still not quite enough. Its stamina is just a little bit too low to withstand it. And then Dragonite, you can probably just go straight Icy Wind. I don't see why not. Icy Wind's gonna do almost gonna be able to one-shot. You obviously should one-shot it in the 0 shield if you can. But that looks like the Icy Wind would be enough with the Ice Shards to take it out. Yeah, it's a pretty straightforward matchup. And then it loses to Snorlax, unfortunately, even after the bait. And there's probably no like alternative situations. Like if you go straight Icy Wind, it unfortunately the Body Slam is just gonna still KO. It goes from 44 damage to 30, but it's still enough to take out Glaceon. It's just a little bit unfortunate. There's probably not too much you can do there. So those are the 6 picks that I would strongly consider if you're looking to play some off-meta Pokemon that are going to be very strong against the core meta. I think Gyarados really high up, Glaceon really high up. Obviously, a lot of these struggle against Metagross. Metagross is kind of like, or the no fun Pokemon, I should say. And yeah, so anyways, I'm gonna leave it there. If you like this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see everyone in the next video.